Hi. So we're going to do a little movement Monday. And I just like to start it by saying that I have a plan, and my plan involves starting at the beginning. And the beginning is breathing and alignment. And one of the reasons that I have my half dome foam roller in my hand is I want to talk about how if you're in alignment, we are going to use it on the floor in a minute, but if you're in alignment, this core container will have your breathing diaphragm on top and your pelvic diaphragm on the bottom, and they'll be aligned, and it makes it so much easier for the breathing and the core engagement to both happen. So that's why we do it, not to follow some strict rules that come from some exercise alignment rule book, but more because there's more efficient use of your core when your breathing and your pelvic floor can work together. And one way of thinking about it is that as we age, we sometimes get slumped over, and sometimes that happens also just from working at a desk a lot. So if you're in a position like this, you can see that my breathing diaphragm is not stacked right over my pelvic diaphragm. I'm having a more difficult time getting in a good inhale and a good exhale of the muscles contracting and bringing the air out. Once I get myself more stacked up, it becomes easier. So there's all kinds of aspects to stacking up. And we're just going to start. Number one, you don't have to have a half dome foam roller. You could use a yoga block. My foot's just not tall enough for that. But maybe if you have a lower yoga block. And I have pictures in both the group and in Instagram of various things around the house you can use for your calf stretch. So we're going to start with a calf stretch. And what I want you to notice is that I've got my back foot well behind my front foot, because the first thing I want to do is make sure my hip, and actually I'm going to turn this way for you so you can see that I want to have my hip, the leg that I'm stretching, I want my hip right above my heel. So let's say I'm back here and I think to myself, well, you know what? I can have my hip over my heel and my shoulders over, or my rib cage over my hips. I'm going to touch the wall so that I don't wobble, and I'm going to just see about bringing this leg a little further forward, and I feel more of a stretch. So that's a good thing. It hasn't taken me out of my stacked position. If I try to come too far forward, it might end up changing the shape of my body, and I don't want that. I don't want my ribs coming out of my body. So I'm just going to find today, there we go. I've got a nice stretch going on back there, and I'm going to breathe. So inhaling into all the aspects of your rib cage and exhaling, just feeling that exhale drawing the air out. So you can continue to breathe, and you stretch, and then you'll switch to the other side. So when you do the other side, it's going to be totally different. There might be a few unicorns out there where you're exactly the same on each side, but for most of us, one side is a little better than the other, and that's just the way it goes. So you find your place, and you can put your hand on the wall and do your adjustments, figure out the place where your hip is stacked, and I think I got over aggressive there. And I'm just stretching my calf. And I didn't show you on the first side that you can also bend this knee, and now you're getting deeper into the soleus muscle, the one under the big gastroc muscle. So 2 different calf muscles, that's all you need to know. And then we end with a double leg stretch. And the best way to do this is start with your knees bent and find a little bit of a hip hinge over, and then see about a little more straightening and just see if you can feel some action going on. Some of us may feel it more in our hamstrings, and some may feel it more in the calves. just depends. And we breathe. Noticing that in this hip hinge, I'm not rounding my back, so I'm keeping that clear path for the air going up and down through my torso. So I'm going to put that to the side. And we're going to just take a break for a second and think about our breathing again. So we inhale and the air goes in, our rib cage expands in all directions, the breathing diaphragm goes down, the pelvic diaphragm goes down, and then we exhale, and both the diaphragms go up and the air goes out. So we inhale and the pressure change and the volume change cause the diaphragms to go down. We exhale and it reverses. And that's really all there is to it. And we want to keep a clear pathway for this action to be going, because the exhaling action really facilitates that tightening of low abdominal muscles that helps you stabilize your core. So we're going to use that as we go to our next thing, and that is the hip list. Because if we do want to stack our body, one of the nice things about that is we can activate our bum, and having a really good strong bum is a part of aging gracefully. You walk better and you sit better. You get down and up from sitting better. So what we're going to do is think about keeping our hip over our heel. So I'm not standing like this. My low back is not arched. My hips are not pressing forward. I sometimes find myself doing that at the kitchen counter. I don't know about you. I bet you might do that too. So I'm always having to remind myself to back my hips up. So I'm in a position where my hips are pretty well backed up. And I'm going to think about shifting my weight from centered over both feet to over here a little more on my right foot. And I'm going to think about the weight being more in the heel of that foot, but I've still got my toes firmly planted on the ground. Now I'm going to think about pressing down with my right foot, and you'll notice I'm sort of kickstanding my left foot because I want to think about it being light. And I want to press down and not out, but down and keeping my hip in. So that is a hip list, and I'm really activating my medial glutes. I can feel it in my bum. And then we'll switch to the other side. So we haven't lifted a foot yet. We've just made it light. So I switch my weight towards the heel of my left foot. I stand up straight, press down into the floor, mostly through the heel, keeping the toes grounded as well. And then just see how I can feel my right foot being really light. And come back down. So now this time we're going to try to lift the foot. So I'm not going to bend my knee and point my toe like a kickstand. I'm actually going to push down and keep my hip in. And I'm just going to see if I could possibly, when I flex my heel, bringing my toes more towards my face on this leg, if I can balance and just float. So if someone was across a football field from me, they would not see my foot really off the ground. So it's just skimming off the ground. But I'm firm in this leg and my hip hasn't gone out to the side. I'm really using my exhale to keep my core steady, to hold that, and this is work. And then we'll switch to the other side. Pushing down, keeping my hip in. See about floating. And if you can't float, or if you float touching a wall, that's good too. You can just touch the wall. And sometimes you get a little wobbly. That's normal. Good. Holding it there. Backing my hips up a little. I felt myself with my hips sort of migrating forward. And then we're going to move into a hip hinge. So a hip hinge is when you're taking your pubic bone in between your legs. Another way to think about it is you're taking your tailbone back behind you. Another way to think about it is if your sitting bones are little flashlights pointing down, you're taking them and having them shine more towards the end corner of the room. But the key to all of that is your torso stays exactly the same. So there's no change in your spine. You are taking your spine, and I'm going to put one hand on my pelvis, one on the back of my head. And what I want to do is press my head into my hand. I want to feel my pelvis with this lower hand. And when I hip hinge, I'm just going as far as I can go, keeping these two the same. So I don't want to all of a sudden feel that. So hopefully you can feel, and your knees are soft, and you're just letting your torso rotate over your legs. So it's like your legs are two sticks, and you're like one of those little guys that bobbles in the drink, and you're just going hinge over. We're not going super far, and we're coming back up. So we're hinging over with our hands on our pelvis, and we're coming back up. Notice that you don't want it to go into your low back. You can put your hands like so. Another great way to do it is to get a dowel or a broomstick and hold it behind you. Use your breath for the hard part. So for me, the hard part is coming up. I use my breath. Use that exhale like a marble traveling up from my pubic bone behind my belly button. And that's how I come back up, really using my whole core. And the alignment, the stacked alignment, allows all those muscles in that symphony of breathing to really work. And then we're just gonna calm it down. So this is a very gentle movement today, not a lot of work. It'll get harder. And we just inhale and exhale, seeing if we can notice or make the noticing happen, because it's very hard to feel your diaphragm and your pelvic floor moving, but that as you breathe, your inhale and exhale is this beautiful concert. And if we sometimes think about the fact that when we get into a position like this, it's just harder to do. Try now visualizing that up and down when you're in this position. It's just not that easy. So much easier to visualize it here. So enjoy, and I'll see you next Monday for another movement moment.